My first music listening experience was the cassette tape, and I thought it was amazing, especially the Walkman. I could take it wherever I wanted. Granted, I was 10 and I wasn't going to that many places, but the one fatal flaw it had was that you couldn't easily skip to your favorite song on an album. Albums were basically meant to listen to from start to finish. That changed when the CD player came out and there was a button that allowed you to skip tracks. Today, you basically have all of your entertainment on demand. You can create curated playlists on Spotify, you have timestamps and YouTube videos, and yes, you can even do it with podcast episodes thanks to podcast chapters. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. Hey everybody, my name's Joe Casabona. I'm the evangelist here at RSS.com, and today I'm going to tell you about podcast chapters, what they are, why they're important, and how you can easily add them to your podcast episodes using RSS.com. Let's dive into it. So first of all, what are podcast chapters? Podcast chapters are timestamps in an audio file that provide your listeners with a way to jump to specific parts of an episode. And they can include unique images, titles, and links. They're really great for enhancing your storytelling, creating a more immersive and visual experience with your podcast. One of my favorite podcasts is called Talkin' Yanks. It's a New York Yankees podcast, and at the end of every series they play, they do a recap episode where they do some groundskeeping, they talk about the injuries, they recap every game of that series, and then they give out awards at the end of the episode. If I have watched every game, I really don't feel like I need to listen to the recaps, and so I will skip right to the awards. Podcast chapters, which Talkin' Yanks uses, are an easy way for me to do that without having to scrub through the episode to find out where they start the awards. So I alluded to this a little bit, but why should we use them? Well, they can provide a timeline of key moments in your episodes to quickly access, especially if someone's in a time crunch or is really just interested in one part of the episode. They also add a visual element, which is especially helpful if you're referencing something, an image, a chart, or you just want to show an example of what you're talking about. This is also great if someone needs to stop listening partway through your episode. They can use chapters to skip right to where they left off, which means all of this culminates in a better listener experience. They don't have to wait through things that they're not necessarily interested in. They can get visuals without having to go to a YouTube video, and they can pick up where they left off if something weird happens in their podcast app. And you might be wondering, where will podcast chapters show up? Well, if you use RSS.com, they'll show up on the web player that we use, as well as the website for your show. They will show up in podcast apps that support chapters like PodViz and Fountain. There is partial support in apps like Pocket Casts, Overcast, and Spotify, as well as Apple Podcasts as of iOS 18. And if you use PodViz to generate YouTube videos, you will get the chapter support there as well. So I know what you're thinking, this sounds interesting. Is it hard? Well, it can be depending on how you do it. You might need to use a third-party app or embed the chapters as you're editing. But the good news is that RSS.com makes it easy. So if you host your podcast with RSS.com, let's take a look at how you can add chapters. Okay, so first, let me just show you what like a finished product looks like. You can see here that I've added a number of chapters to this episode, 3 things you should never make your podcast guests do. We have chapter 1, which is the intro, and then chapters 2, 3, and 4 have custom artwork, adds a little extra visual to really drive home my point. And then we have the outro. So this is what chapters look like, or chapter markers look like. If we go over to the RSS.com website for this podcast, we can see them in action here. So I'll click chapters and we can see the chapter markers are listed here. And if we start playing,
This is the story.
You can see the timeline also has chapter marker demarcations. So now, how do we actually add chapter markers? Well, I have a episode here called Taylor Swift Can't Help Your Podcast, but this can. A little bit clickbaity. But to add the chapter markers, you would hover over this kind of bookmark icon here. This is the chapters icon. Click on that, and then we are given a timeline. Now, this is a place where I have found generative AI like ChatGPT pretty helpful. You can give it the transcript that you've generated with rss.com for free and upload it to ChatGPT, and it'll do a pretty good job of telling you where a chapter marker should go. Sometimes it's really aggressive. I usually say, hey, try to keep it to like one chapter every 7 to 10 minutes or no more than 5 chapter marker or something like that. But with a little finesse, this is actually really good. So I have a list of chapters here. The intro, that's pretty easy. That's going to start at 0, and then it'll go to 000054. So let's see how that looks. When I add the time, you can see the timeline adjusts, and then I can listen to see if that's a good spot. Solopreneur, wherever you are listening to this. I have a confession to make. I'm getting a little tired of the conversation. So that's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and save that. So now I'll go ahead and add the second chapter. This is where I kind of start to talk about Taylor Swift on new heights. So I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to add a chapter link to a story from AP News talking about calling it a milestone moment for podcasts. And I'm going to call this Taylor on New Heights. And then for fun, I'm also going to add some chapter artwork. You can upload it. It should be minimum 1400 by 1400. And then we can zoom in as well. So I'll zoom in here, maybe a little bit more. Yeah, that's really good. And then I will add the next marker. So according to my marker list here, it's around 320 that it'll go to. So let's see how that sounds. I really strongly recommend that you do check if you use AI generated chapter markers because it could be off by a few seconds. CB radio, for those of us who remember CB radios, and people would still be talking about it. And it would mean nothing for the trucking industry. No, the things that help podcasters, content creators, small business owners. So I'm going to adjust this to 319 and then we'll save. So I'll just go ahead and add the rest of the chapter markers now, and then we'll come back. Okay, so we have all of the chapters here. Taylor on New Heights, what actually works, my gaps framework, a case study, and then the outro. I'll go ahead and click done, and the chapter markers will get added. We can immediately see this on the public website. If we go to the latest episode, we could see the chapters here with the artwork, and we can jump right to a section. Now, I will say here that if you have paid ads turned on, they will probably offset the chapter markers by 30 to 60 seconds. So just be mindful of that. This is true across all podcasts, though. So any podcasts that are adding in dynamic ads, the chapter markers will be offset. I think most podcast listeners do generally understand that and can make that adjustment. The other thing I'll say here is that there are opinions on how you should approach chapter markers if you have baked in ads. Some will say definitely don't include the baked in ads in your chapter markers because people could just skip them. But the truth is that if people really aren't interested in listening to ads, they're going to skip them anyway. And so I think, include the sponsor chapter markers, maybe add the call to action at the beginning of the next chapter if you want to do right by your sponsors. But I would account for this. Our job as podcasters is to create the best experience for them. And if they don't want to listen to the ads, if they are not going to be open to the ads or ever click to buy because of the podcast ad, then it doesn't affect the sponsor either. So if you're selling sponsorships, let your sponsors know, hey, we usually include a chapter marker. I hope you're okay with that. But ultimately, we want to create a great experience for the listener. And if we're including chapter markers, I would go with including a chapter marker for the sponsor, or making sure that the sponsors always start at the end of a chapter so that people can easily skip to the next one if they want. Because again, if they're not going to listen to the ad anyway, then they're never going to convert. So we can make it a little bit easier for them. So the other thing I wanted to show here was what chapters look like in apps that support chapters. So this is the Fountain app. I usually use the Pocket Cast app, which also supports chapters. Apps like Overcast will support in some instances, I think, especially if you embed the chapters in the MP3. Though when I add chapters through my dashboard here, they don't usually get added. So it really depends on the app you're working with, but many do support chapters at this point. So in Fountain, here's what it looks like. You can see I have the Taylor Swift episode up, and there's a little icon here that looks like a book. If you click on that, you will see the chapters, and you can see I've got the intro, there's the custom artwork, and there's also the link. So if you click the link, it'll take you to the story or the resource in the case of my GAPS framework. And then you can click on a chapter we'll talk about to get to the next spot. Now, the other thing to note here is that chapters do get sent over if you use PodViz to create a video. I've started this in the interest of time. So this is publishing the episode to YouTube. Once this is done, I'll be able to show you what it looks like with the chapter artwork and with the chapter markers inside the YouTube description. While we wait for that, I should note that if you use a custom description, so if I click on this one and I say I would like to use a different title and description, you'll have to manually add the chapter markers because what you write here will overwrite everything that RSS.com and PodViz automatically sends over. So if you do want a custom description for the YouTube channel, just remember that you'll need to manually add the chapter markers yourself. If you don't, then we will send the podcast description and add the chapter markers to the bottom of that description. Okay, so we have the video here on YouTube. If we scroll to the description, we'll see the chapters here. And then if we click on one of the chapters, it'll jump to that chapter, and it'll also include our custom artwork, which is a really nice touch for the video. Makes it a little bit more engaging than just some static artwork. Now, if you are interested in using chapters and you want to give RSS.com a try, head over to RSS.com. If you're on a different host, you can get 6 months for free by switching to us. Head over to RSS.com/switch to learn more. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you have any questions about chapters or anything else about RSS.com, leave a comment below. And until next time, I'll see you out there.